All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at the Volume. Very special guest, Mr. Jovan Buha, returning to the show. Laker fans, he's going to be joining us at least for the next month or so, about once a week, to break down all of the storylines surrounding the Los Angeles Lakers. For those of you guys who are not Laker fans, we still have another show coming out later today. We're going to be doing a power ranking video where we hit the top 10 teams in the league at this point. And then we're also going to do a deep dive on the Los Angeles Clippers, who are a roiling shit show right now, which will be fun to get into. But we're going to talk Lakers for a little bit right now. Mr. Jovan Buha, it's very good to see you again. Lot to get into today. Let's start with a tweet that you sent out earlier today, referring to Jared Vanderbilt's impending return. You said that he's been cleared by the medical staff to start ramping up. What else have you heard surrounding that? And if you had to guess a timeline on Vando's return, what would you put right now?
Yeah, I'd be on the conservative side with Vando, looking at 1 to 2 weeks right now. If I had to target a return date, I'm looking at either the 22nd or the 25th. So around Thanksgiving, because you got to remember, he got injured, during the first preseason game. So he missed the entirety of the preseason. He's missed the first 10 games, is going to miss, again, at least, I think, a few more games. So that ramp up process, it's a pretty vague term. I think the optimism there is that he's been cleared to start to ramp up. But a ramp up can be a few days. It can be a couple weeks. So I think with the injury luck that the Lakers have had in recent seasons and the way that some of these things have gone, I tend to be more on the conservative end. So I'm looking at probably closer to week and a half to 2 weeks before Vando is back.
And they're going to need him. It's funny because he was probably their very best point of attack defender last year. And he averaged 7 rebounds a game last year. 2 very specific issues that the Lakers were having trouble with. And him coming back kind of solves a lot of their regular season problems. It's funny. You got to differentiate between regular season problems and playoff problems. And does Vando solve a lot of the big picture problems with whatever the potential playoff ceiling is with the Lakers? That's up for debate, but certainly within the context of the regular season, that dude fixes so many of their problems. It's not even funny. And I'm sure they'd like to have him back, but that's not the only injured Laker right now. LeBron James missed last night's game against the Blazers with essentially what was referred to as like kind of lingering issues with his shin injury that he got with Kevin Durant. Do you think last night's rest for LeBron was more a proactive, just trying to find days off for him? Or do you think he's actually dealing with some sort of issue in that shin?
From my understanding, it is a proactive situation where the Lakers are just trying to be precautionary. LeBron, I mean, remember, we got to go back to opening night where LeBron plays 29 minutes against the Nuggets. Everybody's freaking out. Why did he play so few minutes? And Darvin Ham, mentions this minutes restriction that they're going to try and keep him playing 28 to 30 minutes a night. But since then, that has gone out the window. LeBron has played 32 or more minutes in every game except for the Houston game, which was a 34-point blowout loss. He played 27 minutes in that game. So if you look at the workload, the Lakers have had to rely on LeBron a lot more than I think they initially anticipated, in part due to injuries, due to several players underperforming offensively, and really just the offense cratering when he's not on the floor. So I think they viewed this opportunity against Portland, and already a team that looks like a lottery team. But then you add in Scoot Henderson's out, Anthony Simons is out, Robert Williams is out. So that was a game that the Lakers identified as we should still be able to beat this team even if LeBron isn't playing. And it was pretty close. They almost didn't escape with the win, but they ended up winning the game. LeBron got some rest, and now he's got a couple days off until they have a tough back-to-back against Memphis and Sacramento.
Yeah, it's interesting because if he was dealing with some sort of lingering thing from the shin, I don't think he would have looked as good as he did down the stretch against the Suns. Like, he more or less looked like LeBron in the second half of that game. So I'm not really concerned about it in the big picture. The reality is that in the modern NBA, there's just not a lot of nights that you circle as like, hey, maybe we can get this one without LeBron. And like, that was literally the perfect one. If you really like, kind of after a game where he's particularly sore and before an important in-season tournament game and a back-to-back, like it just kind of seemed like the perfect circumstances. I wasn't even the slightest bit worried about it when I saw that news. The biggest story surrounding the Lakers this past week was Austin Reaves being moved to the bench, a move that I thought, was at least the motivation behind it made sense, in the sense that like the Lakers starting lineup was struggling consistently, and the backcourt in particular was a driving force behind those struggles. But the team is kind of pitching it as like, he's our Manu Ginobili. Shout out to Logan Swaim, head of content here at The Volume. He basically coined that term. But like it's being portrayed as essentially this big picture San Antonio Spurs. We're going to empower him the way we did Manu kind of thing. But what have you heard behind the scenes, behind like the reasoning behind moving Austin, whether or not it's a permanent thing or a temporary thing, and just how he and some other people in the locker room might have reacted to that change?
Yeah, well, I was very surprised by it. And in speaking with people around the team, a lot of people were surprised by it. It seems like it was a decision that Darvin Ham kind of kept close to the vest and really tight within his coaching staff. And he made the decision after the Houston game, as they were heading over to Phoenix, met with Chris Gent, one of his lead assistants, and they kind of talked it through, came to that decision. And then he and Austin met up in Phoenix at the hotel, had about a 30-minute conversation and kind of talked through it. And I think the Lakers, if you look at it now, like the Lakers are kind of doing a half measure where they clearly had to split up D'Angelo Russell and Austin Reaves. That backcourt just was not working. If you look at all the lineup data and just the eye tests, like those two guys have such similar strengths and weaknesses. And I think a lot of the problems that they were having defensively and on the defensive glass in particular kind of stemmed from just having Austin and D'Lo out there, and those guys not really being able to hit guys in the paint or rotate rotate properly or whatnot. So I think they had to split that backcourt up, but it's kind of a half measure in my opinion, just because if you look at it, D'Lo's been starting games, but Austin's been closing. And to me, it's like you're trying to keep both sides happy, where you're like, okay, D'Lo's been a starter his entire career. We're going to keep him in the starting group. Austin, you're going to come off the bench, but now you're going to close games. So in the Phoenix game, Austin played the entirety of the fourth quarter. D'Lo didn't play. Then in the Portland game, Austin checked in at the 5-minute mark for D'Lo. D'Lo sat the rest of that. So on the one hand, you're still seeing that actions speak louder than words, and the Lakers are saying, we trust Austin running the offense in crunch time more than we trust D'Lo. And that kind of shows their commitment and confidence to Austin. But to me, it's still like, if you had to split them up, I would go with the guy who's better, who's your third best player, who's been better over the entirety of kind of this tandem together, who was better in the playoffs, who Darvin Ham said is a future all-star. Like, I just don't really see trying to split it up this way, where you're trying to keep D'Lo happy by keeping him the starter, but it's almost kind of this token starter position where when it comes down to crunch time, you're going to still split them up and you're going to lean towards Austin. So I think, also from talking to people, there's a sense that Austin would take a benching better than D'Lo would. And that, this was a concern the Lakers had in the Western Conference Finals against Denver, where D'Lo was kind of unplayable on both sides of the ball. And it took till game 4 for them to really feel comfortable benching him and just saying, hey, like, this is our last resort. If he doesn't take it well, we're about to get swept anyway. So I think that was another sense too, was that Austin's a good soldier. He stayed professional throughout discussing the demotion. I know they're calling it a realignment. I'm calling it a demotion. And, so I think that was another sense too, was D'Lo has been playing slightly better. I think that gap is shrinking, but it was also kind of politically trying to figure out how can we keep both sides happy. And so far it's been D'Lo starting and Austin closing.
Yeah, I think that's what's so funny about the Manu Ginobili thing is like the important context to why Manu Ginobili came off the bench was Tony Parker was a better player than him. Like that, Tony Parker was second team All NBA. Tony Parker was a guy that was, essentially just a better option in the starting lineup than Austin Reaves was. Now, I think there's it's important to acknowledge that that's probably the reason that Austin's younger, doesn't have his, obviously doesn't have the pedigree that D'Angelo Russell did coming out of college. Obviously, he was this, big time scorer out of Ohio State. He was a lottery pick. It's a totally different vibe in terms of their kind of like ego that they're bringing into the situation, right? And I think that obviously is going to naturally make Austin kind of an easier target there, for lack of a better term. Now, I do think that it's important to acknowledge why this isn't working, because more or less these two guys were the backcourt last year, and it didn't seem like a problem until they ran into that Denver matchup. And, you and I talked about this after media day, and I think it's safe to say that the D'Lo Austin backcourt was destined to be broken up at the deadline because of that Denver series and the realities of the limitations of those two as a top tier like playoff duo in the backcourt. But they should have been fine in the regular season. And so there's a reason why it hasn't been working out. And I think a big part of it is like Austin hasn't been as good defensively as he was last year. Now, there's context there. Like, he's in general been in a little bit of a funk to start the season. He had a really long off season with a lot of mileage on his legs. And maybe it's one of those things where like, as the season progresses, he'll get back into better shape. But he hasn't been as good. He hasn't been as good on the glass. He hasn't been as good at the point of attack. He hasn't been as good in his rotations. He just hasn't been as good as he was last year. Now, I don't think basketball players just magically get bad at basketball overnight like that. I think he's just dealing with some stuff and he will be fine. But that duo won't be able to play together in the regular season until, the two of them kind of start holding up better there. I do think Vanderbilt coming back helps a lot, in the sense that he kind of takes on a lot of the dirty work responsibilities that you expect from the backcourt. He is a primary point of attack guy, excellent defensive rebounder in a way that Taurean Prince is not. So that's the next question here. When Vando comes back, do you think Austin goes back into the starting lineup at that point, or do you think they slot Taurean Prince at the 2? What do you think is going to be the look when Vando comes back?
My understanding is it's TBD right now. I think the Lakers are still in evaluation period with how they view Austin coming off the bench versus starting. I do expect Vando to go back into the starting group. I think he'll start over either Cam or Taurean, which is kind of a crazy statement to make with the way that Cam has come on these last 2 games in particular. But I think it's been about 3 or 4 games now that he started to play better, even if his shot hasn't been reliable. But so right now I would peg it as D'Lo, probably Taurean, Vando, LeBron, and AD as the projected starting lineup once Vando is back. But a lot of things could change. Like, I think Taurean hasn't shot the ball well. He's shooting 31.4% on threes this season. That was a guy that coming in, what was a near 40% career 3-point shooter. So if he continues to struggle, I think he probably has to move to the bench. And then, who knows? Maybe Vando is the guy that, I was talking to someone this morning and they were saying maybe Vando is that the kind of the bridge to making the Austin D'Lo backcourt work again, where he handles the top perimeter assignments. He gives you that energy and athleticism and length in the front court, a good defensive rebounder, and just someone who, we saw it work in the regular season where that 5-some was really good together. And I think they're about plus 10 or plus 11 points per 100 possessions off the top of my head. So I think Vando, again, we'll see when he returns. We'll see how guys are playing up until that point. But so far the Lakers are 2-0 with Austin coming off the bench. I think he has played well in that role. Cam has played well in the starting group. But I think longer term and just big picture, as you were hinting at, if D'Angelo Russell isn't here past the trade deadline, then this is all kind of for naught, where now you're going to have to, I assume if you're trading D'Lo, you're probably moving Austin back into the starting lineup. So it's like, Austin is the guy who's signed for 3 more seasons. He's going to be here past the trade deadline in LA. Like, I think it's a mistake benching him personally. I understand the logic behind it, but I disagree with it. And I know several people within the team disagree with it. And I don't know. I think they're an interesting spot with it, but I think Vando is going to go back to starting, and it comes down to probably Taurean or Cam for the 5th starter as of right now.
I've kind of liked the big looks in general when Taurean's been at the 2 or Cam Reddish has been at the 2. I think in the big picture, that's kind of what the team looks like, is basically Torian at the 2 plus whatever player they get back for D'Lo, or maybe Torian at the 3 with whatever player they get back from D'Lo if it's a guard. But like that kind of, to me, I mentioned this to you in a text message the other day, and I think it's the truth. But like when you look at this Austin situation, when you look at in general just the way that the starting lineup has looked, when you go back to the Denver Nuggets series, we kind of said this on media day, but I feel more certain about it now. I think D'Angelo Russell getting traded is one of the safest bets in the NBA this season. It's a simple question of like, if you can't play him alongside your third best player in the backcourt and you have to bring him off the bench. And if you look at the lineup data and it's like whenever one of them's on, but the other's off is literally when the team has been playing at their best. Like, and that goes for both of them. Even the D'Lo led units without Austin have been really good. So like, it's pretty clear that that's the direction that they're going. In the NBA, the game can change in an instant, but no matter how the action unfolds, DraftKings Sportsbook has your back. This week, new customers can score $150 instantly in bonus bets just for betting $5 on basketball. Win or lose, you get an instant dub. They even have great same-game parlays. Like in the Celtics-Knicks game, you can get the Celtics money line, Tatum over 26.5 points, Jaylen Brown over 22.5 points. That's at plus 258 odds. In the Bucks-Bulls game, you can get Bucks money line, Giannis over 28.5 points and Dame over 5.5 assists at plus 252 odds. So many different ways to bet the NBA. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. New customers can get $150 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on basketball. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code HOOPS. The crown is yours.
For a limited time, Verizon customers can get Netflix and NFL Plus for just $25 a month. It's called Plus Play. That's $120 in annual savings. Plus Play is a platform where Verizon customers can shop, manage, and save on the subscriptions that you already love, right? Like Netflix and NFL Plus. With NFL Plus Premium, you get access to live games on mobile, my fave, NFL Red Zone, NFL Network, and more. Just go to Verizon.com/plusplay. Verizon.com/plusplay to save on Netflix and NFL Plus today for a limited time only now. Limited time only.
In sports, the scoreboard doesn't tell the full story. But Netflix does. Stories about dads who happen to be world-class quarterbacks, untold tales of athletes you thought you knew, the heart-racing pressure for the heart, soul, and survival of the multi-billion-dollar business of F1, stories about college kids who were given a last chance at redemption, David Beckham's meteoric rise to not only becoming a global soccer phenomenon, but also becoming one of the biggest celebrity couples in pop culture. From upsets to injuries, from comebacks to victories, we get to see it all with Netflix Sports. These are the stories that turn us all into fans and give everyone something to cheer for, to feel for, to hold your breath for, and to get up out of your seat for. Whether you're a diehard fan or you're brand new, with shows like F1 Drive to Survive, Quarterback, Full Swing, Untold, Beckham, and so many more, Netflix has the stories for every type of fan. Netflix turns us all into fans. I guess my question for you is, have you heard anything coming from the Laker front office that they are as aware of this issue and that they also see that as the inevitable destination? And if so, do you know what archetype of player that they're looking at? Are they looking for like big fish? And we saw that report come out the other day that the Lakers might be looking at a star. Or do you think they're looking at more a higher quality role player upgrade for that two or three spot?
So it's been pretty quiet on the trade front, I think, since the beginning of camp. But when they re-signed D'Lo and it came out that he had declined his no trade clause, part of a little CBA wrinkle. When you sign a 1+1 with a player option, you traditionally get a no trade clause for that first year. And with the new CBA, they tweaked it where you could decline that. And I think the Lakers and D'Lo kind of came to an agreement of, we're going to give you more than you could get on the open market, because I don't think he had much of a market this offseason. And had he left the Lakers, he probably would have had to sign for the full mid-level exception, which would have been about $12.5 million starting out. So Lakers decided, hey, we're going to give you some more money. We're going to give you 17.5 over 2 years, or 17 and a half annually over 2 years. And then you're going to waive this so we can trade you at the trade deadline if we find the right move. So I don't think they're fully committed to trading D'Lo. I think there is a scenario in which they figure this out. It works really well, and they just decide to ride it. And like, I think really this was an opportunity for them to move him to a bench role potentially, where it could have just been like Austin's the starting point guard, D'Lo's the sixth man. And I think that would kind of make more sense in a playoff setting, where if you're playing Denver and you have D'Lo coming off the bench, like he can play 12 to 15 minutes if he's not playing that well, but it's harder to do that if he's the starter and Austin is coming off the bench. So that's where I don't really, I feel like there's a bit of a cognitive dissonance there with the benching of Austin when it feels like a temporary measure. But in terms of guys that they're looking at, I think the Kyrie rumor is going to pop up again come trade deadline. Now, Dallas is off to a great start. They're 8-2. So I don't see why they would trade Kyrie. And that probably looks like something like D'Lo and Rui and a pick for Kyrie. And I don't know, like, I don't see why Dallas does that right now unless they start struggling. And then I think there's going to be a Chicago fire sale. So, Alex Caruso is obviously a Laker favorite, but Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, those have been two guys the Lakers have been interested in for several seasons now. DeMar even going back to the Toronto days, but also in San Antonio. So I look at those, maybe one of those three as a target for LA come the trade deadline, or maybe sooner, depending on when Chicago decides to blow it up. So I think Kyrie will come up again, depending on what happens with Dallas. But I think if Chicago has a fire sale, I think the Lakers are going to be calling them and trying to get in that mix.
Yeah, it's a way different set of circumstances, because last year it was like they needed to make a trade just to be competent in the regular season. And like the Russell Westbrook situation was tenuous. There was bad body language. There was, all of these like Zapruder film type things where like people's like, oh, look, Russ gave a weird look to LeBron across the arena or whatever, or like that sort of thing was
Summer
kind of
League,
the
they
dynamic.
didn't even say hi to each other.
Exactly. And then there was that weird clip the other day where before the tip off of the Clippers game, he was kind of like avoiding the hello handshakes at the start. Yeah. And like, that's the thing, like it was just a totally different vibe. And that's the thing, like the Lakers are not a bad team right now. In the big picture of this regular season. So it's not like, oh my gosh, they need to make a trade. It's just, it's inevitable that they're going to. Like, there are three teams this year that I look at as really high probabilities to make a trade, even though they're already good. Like the Lakers, I think the Milwaukee Bucks, same type of thing, need to upgrade that 2 spot in some way, shape, or form into a rotation level, like starting level defensive rebounding guard, right? And then the Philadelphia 76ers, I think they know they're a good regular season team, but I think they know they probably need one upgrade if they're going to have any chance of contending with the Bucks and the Celtics in the big picture in the playoffs, because of the inevitable playoff shortcomings that Joel Embiid has, right? So it's important to differentiate here. Jovan and I are not saying like the Lakers need to make some big trade because it's like all hell is breaking loose. This is just big picture playoff ceiling stuff. I think the Caruso DeRozan package is one that I find interesting. I really like Rui Hachimura, but he kind of falls into a similar space with D'Lo, where like there's some issues with specific playoff matchups where it's like, because Rui basically plays the same position as LeBron, there are certain matchups where you're like, oh man, we really need him. Memphis and Denver, right? And then there's another matchup against Golden State where you're like, we can't really use him in this series. You know what I mean? And that kind of inherently makes him somebody that you start to look at as, if the target package required more salary filler, you'd probably consider him there, even though he's a great player. The other guy I was looking at was Dorian Finney-Smith with the Brooklyn Nets. I like him as an option that you could get without having to include Rui Hachimura, that basically brings in a good catch and shoot player that can guard at the point of attack, just basically like a better version of Taurean Prince at the 3 that you can go to in those specific situations. But I do think it's going to happen. It's just a question of what they intend to go after it. And I think going after a star would be a huge mistake. I think LeBron looks great. I think that the late game offense has been excellent. I don't see the need for a star more than I see the need for just upgrades at very specific position groups with the role players. So As we move on to kind of talking more X's and O's, let's do a quick little rundown on how the season started. The Lakers are 5-5, 7th in the Western Conference right now, 23rd in offense, 22nd in defense, 25th in rebounding. They're grabbing just 47.4% of available rebounds. Once again, last night in the Blazers games, just way too many long rebounds that in 50-50 balls that are going to the other team. Another kind of concerning stat in the standings, the Lakers are 1-5 against teams that are 500 or better, but they are 4-0 against below 500 teams. So as we move into the second portion of the show, what we're going to do is Jovan and I are going to go over the biggest flaws that we see with this particular team so far through 10 games. We're going to go one at a time, Jovan. So I want you to give me the first item on your list of the biggest flaws with this team. We'll kind of break it down from there.
Well, in flashing red bright lights, 3-point shooting. And it's funny because on paper, I think many people expected this to be the best 3-point shooting supporting cast that the Lakers have had in the LeBron AD era. And you add Christian Wood, you add Taurean Prince, you add Gabe Vincent. But the Lakers, you might have to cover your ears, folks, but 29th in 3-point makes, 30th in 3-point attempts, and 29th in 3-point percentage. So they're a bottom 2 3-point shooting team. And I don't care, they can fix some of these other issues that they have, but if they're a bottom 2 3-point shooting team, they're not going to win a championship, let alone potentially a playoff series with their current level of shooting. And of course, we've seen the last couple of years, they've gotten out to slow starts from a shooting perspective. So they're going to shoot better. It's kind of inevitable. But one stat that I have constantly referenced over the last few years that I think matters in the modern NBA is that since 2011, which is an arbitrary delineation, but for me is kind of when the shift started to small ball and heavy 3-point shooting offenses. So starting with that Dallas Mavericks group, every champion has ranked in the top 10 in 3-point makes, attempts, or percentage. At least one of those three, often two of those, and sometimes even three of those with some of those Warriors teams, the Cavs teams. So 3-point shooting, I mean, I'm not breaking news here, but is a very important thing in the modern era. And I don't think it's good enough for the Lakers to be 15th or 18th in some of those categories. They got to be close to the top 10, at least in one of them. And so, the one exception over the last 13 years has been the 2020 Lakers, but that team had the best defense in the league and 2 top 5, if not top 3 guys. So the Lakers have kind of defied that. I guess they have a recent history of that. But to me, this group has to shoot much better than they have. And barring them making a trade that really upgrades the shooting, I think this is an issue that, again, they're going to shoot better. Maybe they're in the top 20, maybe they're in the top 18 in some of these, categories. But for them to be top or bottom 2 in percentage, really attempts is the one where you can control your attempts. You can't control your makes, you can't control your percentage, but they should be shooting more threes than they are. And I know part of that is due to them not shooting well, but I just look at it as the process isn't correct either, where you got to shoot more threes. And I think that's something that they have to address first with Darvin's offense and just kind of the style of play that they're playing. But potentially at the trade deadline, I think this group probably needs some more shooting.
Yeah, those two pieces at the end are going to be the interesting, progression of the season, whether or not they make some sort of change in the offense and whether or not a trade ends up actually kind of beefing up their ability to generate quality threes. Because the real problem, in my opinion, is that they're not generating quality threes. The Lakers attempt just 14.1 wide open threes per game, which is where the defender's at least 6 feet away. And that ranks 29th in the NBA. And when you look at the shooting percentages, there are a few guys that are shooting around their career norms, like Christian Wood, Rui Hachimura, LeBron James, Cam Reddish. Those guys are all shooting about what you'd expect. None of them are shooting better than you'd expect, but they're all shooting about what you'd expect. But then a lot of their historically good shooters are shooting poorly. Austin Reaves, 32% from 3 this year. He was 40% last year, 44% in the playoffs. D'Angelo Russell, 29%. He was 41% last year. Taurean Prince, he's a career 37%. and he's shooting 31% this year. Max Christie's 1 for 10 on the season. He was 42% last year. Gabe Vincent, 1 for 14 on the season. He was 38% last year. So do I expect some guys to start making shots that they've been missing so far this season? Yeah, the process plays a role. And so this is where I wanted to ask you about the offense, because essentially one of the big storylines kind of surrounding the team this year is they've gone away from their spread pick and roll, spread post up type of offense, kind of a brute force type of offense that they ran last year. And they're running more of like a 5 out, read and react, kind of like dribble handoff, like multiple players, multiple actions, lots of motion taking place on the floor. And it seems to have specifically disrupted their spacing and pick and roll. Like, it just seems like guys are getting in each other's way, and they're just a little. Now it's gotten better over the course of the last few games. They have gone back to a little bit more of the spread pick and roll stuff they did last year. Have you heard? Because I do think that plays a role in the 3-point shooting. Like, I think people get in trouble when they start to expect, like, oh, we'll eventually start making shots. It's like, yeah, there's a luck element in shooting, but there's a huge process element in shooting, in my opinion. So have you heard any buzz surrounding any sort of discontent within the locker room surrounding the offensive approach to this point in the season?
No, but I think there's a healthy level of frustration with the results. I think naturally, they don't want to be 22nd in offense, and they don't want to be again 29th in 3-point shooting percentage. Like, that's not what they came into. Like, if anything, on paper, this group looked better offensively than defensively, and I think it's really been the opposite, where again they've kind of been better defensively. The games that they've won, they've been able to lock down defensively, play bigger lineups, and kind of figure it out and muck it up and win games that way. So I think, as you pointed out, I think that there's a process problem here, but also with a read and react type offense and a 5-out offense, like, that takes reps, that takes continuity. And I think with having certain guys out, several guys have been in and out of the lineup, not really the principal guys for the most part. LeBron has missed 1 game now. AD's missed 1 game now. Austin and D'Lo have been available for all 10 games, but Vando's missed all 10 games. Gabe's missed 6. Rui's missed 4. Torian's missed 2. So you've had several prominent guys within the rotation in and out of the lineup, or just out of it altogether. And I think it's kind of been a process of just figuring out, like, you have to know how certain guys like to play, how certain guys like to move. What are they going to do off the ball? What are they going to do? Like, how does this guy like to reject the screen? How does this guy like to roll? Like, all that stuff comes down to timing and continuity and reps. They haven't had a lot of practice time. That's just kind of the nature of the modern NBA is, a lot of times you're figuring this stuff out on the fly in games. The Lakers have had several instances in which they've had walkthroughs and shoot arounds trying to implement some of this stuff, but it's hard to do on the fly compared to actually figuring it out. So I do give them some grace and say, I think there is an element of just everyone's kind of adjusting. I think some of the stuff has affected Austin and D'Lo, and that's why that partnership hasn't necessarily worked the way that it did last season. But I think for them, they want to give it. Darvin has constantly said, give it 20 games and then let's reevaluate it. So I think we'll see what the next 10 games look like. And if they continue to struggle, I think they have to potentially look at going back to more of last season's 4-out offense. And I think that suits. It wasn't great last year. Obviously, they still struggled offensively, but we at least saw the ceiling of that team could make a Western Conference Finals. Like, right now, I think the offense has been so bad that if this continues for another 5-10 games, like, you really do have to reevaluate it.
Well, and that specifically is the issue that I have with it, is when you look at the bigger picture, the guys that it seems to be negatively impacting the most are guys that you're going to need in a big way towards the tail end of the season. Like, D'Angelo Russell has actually been a better player in the regular season so far this year than Austin, even though you and I both agree Austin is a better player. But in this specific offensive approach, D'Lo just seems more comfortable. I think a big part of it is his strength. He's stronger than Austin right now, so he has a little bit better time getting to his spots for his little short, little mid-range jump shots. And I think like Austin in particular is a guy that is like kind of an old school, let him cook type of scorer, in the sense that you kind of have to give him space, and he needs to be able to take 7 or 8 dribbles in a pick and roll to get to the spot that he wants to get to. Austin can also play excellent off the ball, but in his on ball reps, that's kind of when he's at his best. And I haven't really been pleased with how Anthony Davis has been involved in the offense, specifically in the 5-out looks. And so that has been concerning, that he's already completely abandoned the jump shot after basically using it, intentionally, and talking about using it intentionally in the preseason. So I would say that, like, when 2 of your best 3 players seem to be the opposite of empowered within your offensive look, it's time to potentially consider altering it. I have seen them, at least within the in the context of when Austin's on the floor with his own unit and D'Lo's off, they do start to run more of that kind of spread pick and roll stuff they did last year. So I think, and in the big picture, I think it's important to have multiple looks and to be able to go to different offensive approaches depending on what the matchups dictate and things along those lines. But at the end of the day, this is my main concern with the 5-out offense. If you look at the teams that do it well, teams like Golden State, Sacramento, for instance, they have in Sacramento incredible downhill pressure guys like Malik Monk and De'Aaron Fox, right? And then in Golden State, they have like guys that come flying off the screens shooting, love doing so, and hit those shots at a high rate. And the Lakers kind of don't have either of those. And so to me, it's not necessarily the best fit for this particular group of guys. They have methodical, unathletic guards that need space to go to work. And then they have old school like power players that also need to operate with a cleared side for a post up so that they can make easy reads and things along those lines. So I am curious to see in the big picture how long they stick with it. But I do agree with Darvin Ham's approach in the sense, like, give it some time. Like, let's see if they can figure it out in the meantime. And I would argue that they should still have been winning at a higher rate, even with the offensive struggles, just through better kind of effort and commitment in other areas. So now that we've hit the 3-point shooting element of it, what's the next item on your list as one of the biggest flaws you've seen in the Lakers so far this year?
Perimeter defense. And I think this in part will be not necessarily solved, but at least improved with Gabe Vincent and Jared Vanderbilt coming back. I think those are probably their 2 best perimeter defenders, aside from obviously Anthony Davis. So I think we haven't seen the best perimeter defense from this group in terms of just their potential. But I still look at it like, I think a lot of their issues have, even the Portland game last night, like, I think the Lakers again escaped with the win, and I thought AD and Rui had some nice defensive plays, and I think Cam has done a really good job on the perimeter, but still, like, I feel like guards can kind of get whatever shot they want against the Lakers, it feels like, and I don't know. I think there's something with the point of attack defense hasn't been great. The pick and roll defense, in my opinion, hasn't been great, and I just think, I would have liked to have seen how the Lakers would have fared against Phoenix had Devin Booker been available in either one of those games. I think he would have probably torched them with the way that their guard defense has been. So I just look at it as, again, I think that's part of the reason why they had to split the D'Lo Austin pairing up, was both of those guys have been minus defenders up to this point in the season. And I just look at it as, we had talked about it before the season, early in training camp, of perimeter defense is arguably the biggest concern with this roster. And again, you plug in Vando, but that comes with its own offensive concerns of, that's another non-shooter that you're plugging in there. Teams are going to sag off of him. They're going to load up the paint. So I think there's no, like, Gabe is one guy that I look at as, okay, he's a plus shooter, even with the 1 for 14 3-point shooting. And I think you've seen some good things from him at the point of attack. Definitely a downgrade from Dennis. And I think they really missed Dennis. That's been clear through the first 10 games. But I think the perimeter defense has been pretty shaky at best. And I look at that as something where you mentioned Dorian Finney-Smith. I really like that name. Royce O'Neal, also another guy in Brooklyn. Like those are a couple of guys that, like, 3-and-D-ish, basically 3-and-D wings that could plug some of those holes. But I think Cam's been solid. I think Torian's had some moments, although he fouls a lot and is a little bit undersized in certain matchups. I think Christian Wood held his own against KD for that fourth quarter. But like, I still don't think that's a sustainable, solve there. So I think it's a lot on AD's shoulders, and he's played. I mean, he's what, top 6 or 7 in minutes right now. Basically, is played every game, and they're just asking. They're putting a lot on his shoulders. I think that's unsustainable as well. So for me, it's the perimeter defense and just how they figure out the right lineups and combinations. But I do think it will get better once Gabe and Vando are back.
Yeah, if you actually list out the Lakers' total minutes played this year, and you get past the first 4 guys, which is Austin, D'Lo, LeBron, and AD, who lead the Lakers in minutes, the next 2 are Cam Reddish and Taurean Prince. And I think that's a pretty strong indicator of what Darvin Ham sees from the rest of the roster and their needs. Like you're not those, I would argue those are not your 5th and 6th best players, but they're the guys getting those minutes. And again, like I think I kind of tie these things together because I put perimeter defense on this list, but I reference it as perimeter athleticism and defense and just kind of everything associated with that. Like what the Lakers do not have in their current rotation because of the Vando injury is a top tier NBA athlete who has a high motor. And because they don't have that, and like this was crazy. Like Cam Reddish is rebounding at the highest rate of his career since his second season and getting steals at the highest rate of his career. And it's a big part of that is like they're empowering this kid. It's like you're like the only dude we have right now who's available, who's a top tier athlete that can do this job. Like just go do it. They're basically pointing him and shooting him, and he's doing a really great job within that role. I think Cam Reddish succeeding the way he is a testament to Cam, but it also is a testament to what this roster needs. And you're actually seeing how like a player that is considered essentially like a journeyman in the NBA at this point is playing some of the best basketball of his career because his specific skill set fits what this roster does not have. And if you go back through NBA history, pretty much every single championship team has a high motor top tier athlete. If you look at Bruce Brown last year, Aaron Gordon last year, you go back to Andrew Wiggins and Gary Payton II with the Golden State Warriors, and you go back to Giannis Antetokounmpo and Drew Holiday on the 2021 Bucks and obviously the Lakers. It's like at this phase in LeBron and Anthony Davis's career, you have to have a high motor athlete around them. And I think that kind of helps you in multiple ways. It helps you in the point of attack defense assignment, kind of like staggering and making sure guys are kind of guarding matchups they can handle. But it's also big on the rebounding piece. We mentioned the Lakers have been a horrible rebounding team to start this year. And a big part of that is they lose every 50-50 ball. Every long rebound goes to a bigger, better athlete. And so I think that to me is why like I look at that specific type of upgrade as necessary and why I think going after a star is so foolish. We've seen this again with the Suns. We've seen it again with the Clippers just recently. Like when you bring in a star, when you already have stars, there's a diminishing return on what you get on the third star. And in a lot of cases, what you really just need is dudes that can help make the stars' jobs easier by taking that workload off of their plate. So I'm 100% with you on that page. I think obviously the deadline has some potential to fix that problem. And I think with the assets that they have available, they will be able to make that upgrade. But I think it's going to be really interesting to see what they do before the deadline, because they need to, like, again, D'Angelo Russell can't be traded until January 15th. And, shout out to D'Lo. If he knows he's going to be traded and that more or less has been communicated to him as like a high degree of possibility, right? He's been a professional. He has been a great leader. He's been mentoring some of the younger players on the roster. He is staying mentally engaged and he's playing hard. I actually have been so impressed by D'Angelo Russell this entire season, just with the way he's handled all that. But there is a degree of urgency within that until January 15th that this group needs to find out how to do a better job. What in your opinion is the best way for the Lakers to manage this weakness in the short term?
Well, I think Vando coming back is going to help, but I think you got to go with the bigger lineups. And I recently, actually, this morning had a piece go up, State of the Lakers, 10 observations through 10 games. And one of the things I looked at was the front courts and all the different front court pairings that had at least one of LeBron and AD in the lineup, because of course, that's kind of going to be your foundation. You can have some odd lineups of Christian Wood, Jackson Hayes, and like Taurean Prince, but I don't think that's something you're going to see when it actually matters. And it's clear that the bigger front courts have just been better. And if you look at the net differential on cleaning the glass, like the Lakers play better when they have some combination of Anthony Davis and Christian Wood, Anthony Davis and Jackson Hayes, Anthony Davis and Rui Hachimura, like the bigger lineups. And I'll take egg on my face. Like I was against the two big lineups entering the season. I didn't think they made sense. Like even to this day, I still think Anthony Davis is a 5, and he's kind of been the 5 in those lineups more so than not. But Christian Wood has exceeded expectations. I think he's held up reasonably defensively. Like you don't want him as your primary rim protector, and Darvin has tied his minutes largely to AD and Jackson Hayes for that reason. But I think he's added some length. He's a good weak side shot blocker when AD's contesting a shot. Christian will come with the second level of contesting, or he'll just vacuum up defensive rebounds. That I think in that Phoenix game in particular, that was why the Lakers won that game. Was Phoenix was killing them on the offensive glass. Christian Wood comes in and he helps hold down the fort. So I just look at Lakers have played better with size. I think they have to go back to that being their full-time identity. And we haven't seen the 3-guard lineups because Gabe Vincent's been out. I'm sure if he was playing, we would see some D'Lo, Gabe, Austin, just because, as we know, Darvin tends to like those lineups. But I think that's not going to work with this current group, with the way that they've been giving up defensive rebounds. They've been susceptible to back cuts and just kind of energy plays that you can't. I mean, part of that has to just be guys being locked in and focused and giving maximum effort. I think the effort has been poor at times, and that's been a little bit disappointing if you're the Lakers. But part of it is just size. And if you have Christian Wood, LeBron James, and Rui Hachimura out there together, that's like 3 dudes 6'9" and above. With LeBron and Rui, you get a level of force and athleticism. With Christian Wood, you get a bunch of size and length, and like it's harder to grab offensive rebounds when those guys are in the paint compared to going AD, Taurean Prince, and Cam Reddish, or just one of those guys being in there in a 3-guard lineup. So for me, it's clear this group has played better bigger, and that's something that they really need to lean into more than I think they have up to this point.
Yeah, again, like if don't try to outplay people in an area that you are undermanned. Like if you can't beat guys to the basketball with straight line speed, then you need to beat them up high. And so like it's a great way to look at it, in the sense that like when they have 3 dudes that are 6'9" and taller and excellent defensive rebounds, like LeBron James, Christian Wood, and Anthony Davis on the floor at the same time, they're going to win a lot. They may lose the occasional long rebound, but they are going to get every damn rebound that's around the rim just because of how big they are. And I agree with you. And honestly, like it's going to require difficult things like doing more staggering of Austin and D'Lo, which they're already doing. But it's clear in terms of the emergency stopgap until January 15th, they basically have to slot, in order to compete physically, someone like Reddish or Taurean Prince at the 2. And I think that's going to be essentially their formula until they get deeper down the line. Essentially, like we can't compete with teams in straight line speed, but we can compete with teams with our overall size because of what Christian Wood ended up being. And like, again, Christian, we said this in our media day pod, but basically Christian Wood is a zero risk proposition in the sense that like he was a veteran minimum contract. Obviously, there were some potential downsides. Everyone's like, oh, he can't guard and pick and roll. He can't guard and pick and roll. And that is true. When he's been the primary rim protector guarding and pick and roll, he's been flambéed. Like that goes without saying. But he's actually been excellent help side defense situations. And he's had some interesting on-ball reps against switches, and then like kind of little niche assignments for 3-4 possessions at a time where he'll guard like Kevin Durant or something like that. And he's proven as that kind of backside guy, essentially the low man behind Anthony Davis or the low man behind Jackson Hayes, to be a really helpful player. And when you combine that with him basically allowing them offensively to operate in that true kind of like, true 4 out, 1 in spacing or 5 out spacing, with a second big on the floor, he's been a home run in that regard. But the question becomes, like, are you going to be able to play Christian Wood next to LeBron James and Anthony Davis for an entire postseason run? And it's probably not. It's probably going to be more of a matchup dependent kind of thing, which keeps bringing us back to the original crux of the issue, which is like, you got to have another straight line top tier athlete at the 2 or 3 that can compete in a lot of these situations and help them win more of those battles. Did you have anything else on your list of biggest flaws? Those are really the only 2 that I put in. Obviously, they're the 3-point shooting and the perimeter athleticism. Obviously, they're both very complicated issues, but those are the only 2 I had. Did you put anything else down?
Yeah, I mean, I think a subcategory of the perimeter athleticism is what we were just talking about. The defensive rebounding has been awful, but I think that like the perimeter defense and the defensive rebounding kind of are both subcategories of the lack of perimeter athleticism. Other than that, no, I think like those are the 2 biggest things. I mean, I think the jump shooting in general, and that kind of starts to stem into some of the 3-point shooting, like has been an issue. And I think this team continues to just be at its best living in the paint. But I would say, I mean, maybe just the offense overall, that would be kind of the third thing for me, would just be the 5-out offense and how stagnant it has been and just kind of janky at times. But other than that, I think that the 3-point shooting and the perimeter defensive and rebounding to me have been kind of the 2 main themes that have translated into each game that have ultimately hurt this team and kind of caused them to play behind for the most part.
Well, that perimeter athleticism piece, I think, will help with the offense piece as well. Because, like, again, everyone thinks of rim pressure as something that has to come from the ball handler. It's not necessarily the case. Like, that straight line athlete just in random transition pushes can cause havoc and bring multiple bodies into the paint. There's, the Mavericks have been using Derek Jones like this a lot, where they'll kind of position him on the weak side wing and he'll just catch and rip to the basket really hard instead of catching and shooting, because he's such a freak athlete that just when he catches and rips, everyone kind of it coalesces around the paint anyway. And so I think just having a really good straight line athlete on the floor next to their core 4 guys would go a long way towards just generating higher quality shots. And that's kind of why I put perimeter athleticism as kind of a vague term, because I think in general that helps in so many different ways, especially in the modern NBA with how things are spaced out. What do you think? Obviously, this has been a disappointing start, right? 5-5. I think I told Logan asked me at the beginning of the season to make a guess based on their first 12 games, since they went 2-10 last year, and I said they'd go 7-5, and I think that's actually on the table as a possibility if they beat Memphis on Tuesday and then they win on Wednesday. But I still think through 10 games that if you gave truth serum to every Laker in that locker room and asked them and said, are you disappointed or happy with how the start of the season went, I think most of them would say they're disappointed. So like with that as kind of the context, what would you say is your biggest silver lining that you've picked away from this team at this point?
Look, I'm feeling optimistic, so I will give you 2 silver linings. One, I think this team has played pretty terrible for the first 10 games. And the fact that they're 5-5 to me is a win. Like, I think they played at, it was funny after the 7th game, Darvin, he was answering a question. And he was kind of like, we could easily be 6-1 right now. And we're clearly not a 1-6 team. And like, I disagree with that. Like, I think the way that they've played, to me, they've played more like a 2-8 or 3-7 team than a team that's like 7-3 or 8-2. Like they've had, like, they're 5-2 in games that have gone into crunch time. And that alone might be its own silver lining of like this team's resolve. Like 4 of their 5 wins have come after trailing by double digits in the first quarter. And in some cases, double digits in the second half. So like this team has showed a resolve and just a kind of a calmness within the chaos that even if they get down, they have a slow start, they can still come back and win a game. So I think the fact that they're 5-5, despite again, bottom, they're bottom 6 in net rating, they're bottom 2 in 3-point shooting. Like they've had a lot of things go against them, all the injuries, all the poor starts. Like to be 5-5 to me is a win in and of itself. But the second thing for me is LeBron in my opinion, is back to his pre-injury form before that foot injury that he had in February, where shooting a career high 56.7% and making a career best 83.4% of his shots within 3 feet at the rim. And that's been like, he might be one of the few exceptions in terms of guys benefiting from the 5-out system. Like some of the driving lanes that LeBron has had. And of course, part of that is just his burst, his athleticism. It's back compared to where it was, let's just say, in the playoffs. But LeBron's finishing at the rim has been incredible. I think his shot selection has been much better than the past couple of years. And just his efficiency so far offensively, like the Lakers have been about 24 points per 100 possessions worse when LeBron has been off the floor. So they're as reliant on him as ever. And on the one hand, you'd like to see some of the D'Lo or Austin-led lineups be better and the Lakers not have to rely on him as much. But the fact that he's looked as good as, and I know you've been on the clutch stuff, like first in the league in clutch baskets, I think third in scoring, and tied for 14th in plus minus in crunch time. So like that's all, like he's been making shots and making plays that he wasn't making last season. So overall, I think the fact that LeBron has looked as good as he has in year 21 at almost 39, that in and of itself to me is a really positive sign for the Lakers' eventual contention if they can just get healthy and potentially make another move, fill in some of these gaps that we're talking about. Like LeBron at that level, I think you can win a championship.
Yeah, the LeBron stuff has been super interesting because you mentioned the 5-out stuff, and it's a really simple concept. With 5-out, if you can get past the first line of defense, the backside rotation is infinitely harder because you don't have a defender waiting in the dunker spot or basically like in an easy help situation. It's a much longer rotation. So LeBron's going to have a head of steam against probably a perimeter player that's in help. So he's going to have a much better chance of finishing around the rim or easier kick out opportunities. But that initial line of defense, the guy that is digging down off of the defender on either side is closer than they would be in a spread pick and roll type of situation or a spread ISO or post-up situation. And so LeBron, with his incredible strength, can just shoot through these tight gaps and get to the rim and have no problem. But it's the lesser athletes that are struggling with it. And to your point, like that's a great example of why, it is worth sticking with in the long run. My thing with the 5-out is just like, I think they should cater it towards each player in the sense that like, hey, we have an Austin-led group out there. Let's run more spread pick and roll. Hey, we got LeBron on the floor. Maybe we run it this way. Like D'Lo lineups have done a good job with the 5-out stuff. So like, I think that's kind of the short-term solution there is kind of just cater the offense more towards each individual group. But the stuff in crunch time is really important because LeBron was a bad clutch player last year. And a big part of that was his jump shot wasn't falling and it kind of spiraled into all of these other, ancillary issues. And it turned into this thing where he'd get the big on the switch and he'd take that pullback three and he just missed it every single time. And it was a huge part of how games kind of ended up being close late that they probably shouldn't have been. This year, he's just been so much more decisive. He's knocked down a bunch of clutch jump shots this year. He has specifically dominated the game as a matchup attacker at the end of games, generating high quality shots against the weaker defensive, kind of areas of their opponents. And so I think that's a huge silver lining. I put two others on my list. One, Christian Wood, which we already talked about, just him hitting as a veteran minimum signing and unlocking real big lineups for this Laker team, I think is a huge home run. And then secondly, just like LeBron's overall level of play and just where he looks in general. We talked about this before the year as like one of the major, kind of like swing factors for this team. Are they going to be able to go toe-to-toe with the best stars in the league? And Anthony Davis, it's been a little bit of a mixed bag. He's had some bad games. He's had some good games. But I think more overall, he's kind of looked more or less like he did last year. LeBron James looks like he's better than he was last year. And I think that's super encouraging. And then lastly, 5-2 in clutch games. That's the 5th best record in the league by winning percentage in clutch situations. The 4th best clutch net rating. The Lakers have been elite on both ends of the floor and have grabbed 55% of available rebounds. So when push comes to shove, they can lock in and they've played really good basketball at the end of games. It's just been funny because like in 4 of their 5 wins, they've been such shit for like 3 quarters, and then they lock in and they play good basketball. And I think that's kind of colored the entire season as disappointing in a way that maybe the record wouldn't suggest. But let's do one last thing before we get out of here. They're going on an East Coast road trip soon, where they're going to play Cleveland and Philly back to back on the road. That's going to be a tough one. But the schedule's a little easier up until then. Really, the tough games are a home game against the Kings and then a home game against the Dallas Mavericks. 2 games which the Lakers will be favored in. Do you think there's any chance that the Lakers hit the road at 11-5 on an 8-game winning streak?
Any chance? Yes. But I think, again, we'd have to see some better overall play from this group. I think you just hit on it where, I think in crunch time, they've been great, but I would just like to see sustained periods. Like I was like looking for that last night against Portland, where even with LeBron out, like that could have been a situation where they just had a wire to wire victory, won that by 15, 20 points. And as subjective as it sounds, I would have felt a lot better about them currently. But the fact that they were kind of messing around with that game, Portland was up, for stretches of the first quarter. They got back into the game in the fourth quarter, and there was a couple of minutes there I thought they were potentially going to win that game. Like to me, just they've kind of been playing with their food, so to speak, a little bit too much. And I would like to just see a little bit more killer instinct from them of just come out and look. They'll play Portland at the end of the week. They've got some winnable games, but Memphis just came into the Clippers arena and beat them. Sacramento, as we know, has been a tough matchup for the Lakers over the past year, just with their speed and their 5-out offense and their perimeter shooting. So I think that's a tough one. Looking at Houston again, they just beat the Lakers by 34 points.
They beat the Nuggets last night too.
Beat the Nuggets. They're on a 5-game win streak, 5 or 6 game win streak.
5 or 6, yeah.
And then you got Dallas, who's been the second best team in the West, in my opinion, up through this point. Also Utah, who's kind of sneakily been a bit of a tough matchup for the Lakers, also with their 5-out offense and some of their spacing and shooting. So I'm going to say no. I don't think it happens. I think it could happen, and they're home for 5 of the next 6 games. Looking at it right now, with the one road game being Portland, but I suspect they go 4-2 over the next 6 games, and that would put them at 9-7, which again, I think with their current level of play, is a win compared to where they could be.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to go 11-5. It's funny in general. I think remember the high motor athlete thing we were talking about? I don't think it's really possible to go on like long win streaks and to blow out teams unless you have high motor athletes, because of the fact that inevitably when a team is down, they start playing hard. And it's kind of like that early fourth quarter run last night. It's like the Lakers are so unathletic that when they start not giving a shit, they just, the bottom falls out. And so like, they're so prone to those ugly stretches. It's like inevitable that they'll drop. I feel the same way, around 9-7, 10-6. Before we get you out of here, how's your Achilles? How is the surgery? How are you holding up mentally? I feel like if I was in your position, I'd be spiraling into depression. So I'm curious to hear how you're doing on that front.
Well, I appreciate it, man. It's been tough. I'm not going to lie. This has definitely been the toughest physical situation I've ever dealt with. I think I've been fortunate to speak with multiple people who've dealt with it. I actually had a conversation with Kevin Durant when the Suns were in town, and we talked a little bit about it. And hadn't met him before, but just went up to him, introduced myself, and asked him for his advice on it. And everyone that has dealt with it has unanimously said like the mental part is the toughest part. Like physically, I'm okay now. I had surgery almost 2 weeks ago. So first few days of surgery were really rough. I had to be on pain medication, couldn't get out of bed. That was really rough to deal with. But since then, largely pain-free. It's just kind of the mental grind of like, you always have to be like, you got to go to the bathroom. Your instinct is stand up, walk to the bathroom. And like, there's been times I've had to stop myself and be like, okay, got to get my scooter. I got this iWalk thing, which is almost like a peg leg kind of, where you put your knee in it, and then it's like a crutch below the knee. So I've been walking around with that a little bit. But the biggest thing for me has been like, I was really looking forward to the season and traveling, and like the beginning of the season is always really fun, getting to know some of the players, getting to go get drinks with people, get dinner. So I wasn't on this past road trip, hoping to be back on the road by the end of the month, hoping to be walking a little bit by the end of the month. So I'm trying to approach this recovery like Aaron Rodgers and exceed expectations. So it's been tough. It has been mentally draining, but I'm trying to keep a good spirit with it.
Yeah, and most importantly, you got a lot of good basketball left in you. You got to get back out on the basketball court one day. Yeah, I've been dealing with Achilles soreness, bad soreness, so bad that I've shut myself down now. This is the third time because I tried to come back too quick twice. And like just last Sunday, a week ago yesterday, I played in a men's league game, and I was like it's worse than it's ever been. I'm like, I gotta shut it down. So I'm shutting down for the next month probably, and just being away from the game as long as I've been over the last couple of weeks, months I should say, has been kind of like torture for me. So I can't even imagine what it's going to be like going without it for a year. Because like it's even above and beyond the love of the game. It's like just really easy way to get good cardio. It's like it just in terms of like just your day-to-day health, like it just helps to be able to strap on a pair of shoes, go to the gym, play for an hour and a half and burn 1,000 calories. Like you don't get to do that anymore. And it's really unfortunate. And I'm really curious. I'm going to be picking your brain throughout the process because like I'm really curious as to what that whole mental challenge is like along the way. Jovan, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Laker fans, like I said, this is going to be a thing at least for the next month, hopefully longer. We appreciate you giving us the time. We appreciate everybody for supporting the show. We will see you guys later today for our power rankings and Clippers evisceration.